So, AMD just launched some new stuff, CPUs, GPUs. Honestly, it's going to be quite interesting because Intel might be in trouble. The 14900K that's been holding the throne for creators might not be the throne holder anymore because AMD is back. So Dr. Lisa Su made an announcement, and let's talk about it then, and what does it mean for creators. There's a whole lot of stuff and very complicated information for a lot of like data centers and for, you know, big businesses, but for you and me, what does it actually mean? Here's what we're going to talk about. Licensing Windows is cheap and easy with whokeys.com, and if you use the code TN20 you get an extra discount. Complete the purchase, copy the key, and paste it to the activation settings. And you're all done. Also check out their Microsoft Office 19 license and use the same code TN20 for the extra discount. Check out whokeys.com in the video description below. So then this was the announcement in Computex that's happening in Taipei right now. And we're just going to be kind of scrolling through most of the things here because they did like healthcare and industrial, and you can see like how much stuff they actually cover and how many different things. There's like enterprise and cloud and embedded and PC, but there's some interesting things as well, and some that are like, okay, I think these are a little bit like cherry-picked benchmark results as well, so we're going to be talking about that as well. Lots of AI, but basically the new thing is the Zen5 architecture, which is for the CPU core, and then the next gen NPU core, which is AMD XDNA2, which is basically just the NPU, you know, that we already know what we have on the Intel PCs, but now AMD's got their own like AI little processor that it comes in there as well. Obviously, we're going to be scrolling through the gaming part, but now we have the Granite Ridge with Zen 5 and Ryzen 9000 series. Bear in mind the desktop on AMD goes every like 2000 kind of series. So we had 1000 and 3000. Well, actually, we do that 2000 as well. That's the weird thing. 1000, 2000, 3000, 5000, 7000. And now we have the 9000. This goes on the AM5 platform. So if you're running any of the B650 or X670 chipsets, then just slot the CPU in, BIOS update, and you're all good to go. DDR5, a little bit of an old news. That's nothing to say. PCIe 5.0, a little bit old news as well. So what does the new Zen architecture of the CPU mean, you know, potentially for us? It means up to 2 times instructions bandwidth, data bandwidth, and AI performance. So up to 2 times kind of, but they're not saying like performance increase, they're saying instruction bandwidth or data bandwidth inside the CPU, which doesn't really tell us everything about the CPU performance. Now this chart here is quite interesting, and this is what we're going to be looking at, because what this means is Zen 4. So if you look at the end nodes GNR3, then the interesting thing here is that the Zen 5, what they're testing is a Ryzen 9 9950X, so the highest end Ryzen 9 on X670E, and then a Zen 4 is configured with Ryzen 7 7700X with the same RAM and everything configuration, which is not actually apples to apples comparison, because they have an 8-core CPU, which is a single CCD, and then they have the new Ryzen 9950X, which we're not sure if this is a single or dual CCDX, but it's 16 core, so not exactly the same, but they're comparing the architectures. Zen 5 IPC, which means instructions per clocks. So if you look at both of the CPUs running at the same clock speed, then you're getting this performance improvement. But the thing is, now here we don't have 8 and 8 core CPUs, so this chart looks a little bit dodgy to me right now, because if we're looking at Cinebench R23, for example, this plus 17% IPC improvement, then the 7700X is running 8 cores, let's say 4 gigahertz, or we don't know what gigahertz they're actually measuring this. And now we have 16 cores at 4 gigahertz, and then 17% performance improvement. It should be a lot more than that, unless they measure it some other way. But let's say I'm giving them benefit of doubt, and there is actually somehow the core count is the same as well, or they're looking at single core performance or something like that. But to me, that is very weird to compare Zen 5 to Zen 4 and then 16 versus 8 cores. So the old is 8 cores, so obviously your new Zen 5 architecture is going to look better. But let's take that aside. Let's look at some of these things here, what we can see. Interestingly, in Handbrake, which is very CPU heavy workload as well, it's only 11% increase. Bear in mind, this is zero line here. The 16 is average across the board there. Speedometer, which is a browser test here, is plus 15%. So that's where working inside Chrome or whatever Safari you're using, well, hopefully not Safari on AMD system, but there the single core performance is very, very important. Puget Bench for Premiere Pro is 16% increase. It's not that big. I'm not sure how they're testing exactly there, but 16% in Adobe Premiere Pro. Cinebench R23 is 17%, and Geekbench 5.4 AES XDS is 35%. Blender 23%. So it looks quite interesting. Although this little thing underneath there says results up to NC NOGR N3, which I just showed you. So then, what is the new CPUs that have been released? So we have the new 9000 series CPUs, which all goes exactly the same kind of naming scheme as on the previous generation, but the 9950X CPU, which has 16 cores and 32 threads. Looks like we've got multi-threading there, and is exactly the same core count as on the previous CPU. And bear in mind, what I just see here is an actual, look, 2 CCDs in there, which means that you've got two 8-core clusters kind of glued together onto that chip in there, which means that you do have a little bit of a different performance what that you just showed on the previous graph there. Up to 5.7 gigahertz boost, which is the same as on the previous generation. Cache 80 megabytes, exactly the same. And then 170 watt TDP, which at first I think AMD launched at 230 watts or something like that, or it pulled 230 watts. But now if you look at AMD specs, it actually shows on the 7950X is also a TDP 170 watts. So it looks like everything is the same in terms of core counts, boost clocks, but they've improved their instructions per clock. So architecture inside, the way they do it, is actually faster, which is very, very interesting. And now probably the next generation, 1150 or 1195, well, how is that gonna go? The next generation of this is gonna go 1190X. If that generation comes out, they might be able to boost it to 6 gigahertz and above or something like that, and then get even more performance boost in there. But right now, at the same power draw, they're giving you more performance, which is very interesting, but usually we don't see from Intel. Intel's always more boost clocks, and it comes usually with bigger power draw as well. So gaming leadership, I don't care about this one. I'm sure there's lots of people who talk about this, but this is between Intel Core i9-14900K versus 9950X from AMD. 16 cores from AMD and 24 cores from Intel, but Intel has 16E cores and 8P cores. Now, interestingly, the Blender performance is 56% faster than the 14900K. That is absolutely insane CPU performance if they're able to do it at 170 watts, because that's a lot lower than Intel. So this could be absolutely insane. I believe that here we're going to actually start to perform better than the 24-core Threadripper from AMD with this Zen 5 architecture, which is absolutely insane. Handbrake 55% as well. Cinebench is 21% faster than Intel, which is pretty cool. Photoshop, not so much, which is interesting because the single core score didn't improve much. The clock speeds are still the same, and Photoshop likes a very fast single core performance. And then 7% in ProCyan Office benchmark. So this looks very interesting for creators. As you can see, for creators, the numbers are actually bigger than for gaming leadership. Another very important thing is the AMD socket longevity. And Intel usually releases 2 CPUs per socket. But AMD has been launching loads of CPUs or generations of CPUs per socket. So AM4, which was the previous socket, remember that guy over there? Now they're actually launching new CPUs for that old platform as well. So it's the first time where I'm seeing like the new socket and the old socket, and they'll release new CPUs for the new socket as well as to the old one, which is very interesting. We're going to get to that in a minute. So the Zen 2 and Zen 3 architectures that are going in there, as well as the 3DV cache one that's for gamers. Creators don't make much sense. And then the AMD Socket 5, at first they said that it's going to be supported 2027, but now they're saying this is going to be beyond as well. So the longevity commitment comes with a little bit of an interesting one. So now if you buy the AMD platform, you can actually upgrade your CPUs at least 3 years from now. You can still put new ones in, probably 4 years from now, put a new CPU in, and you're gonna get more performance, which is absolutely insane. Zen5 now for that one as well. So we'll have to see what comes next. So here are the CPUs now that are coming out and available in July 2024. We're gonna have to test the performance in there as well, and I'm really hoping I'm gonna get some in so I can share you what the creative benchmarks is gonna be like and the new motherboards and so on, because there's new motherboards as well. But this core counts are very, very similar to what you're actually used to. 16 cores, 12 cores, 8 cores, and 6 cores, the 5, 7, 9, and 9 in there. I personally are going to think that this Ryzen 9, the 12 core one, is going to be a very nice, interesting kind of a middle ground boost there for most people at the price point as well. Best bang for buck kind of for this series. But I'm very curious to see what's the difference between the 16 and 12 cores. And is it going to be, how much is going to be the performance increase there? As you can see, the TDP is quite a bit higher on the 16 core version compared to the 12 core, so that's interesting. But it looks like AMD is really trying to nail the power draw a lot less and kind of hammer it in Intel's face, because Intel's had some trouble with recently, you know, when you remove the limits, it actually cooks your CPU much faster than you should, and you should actually use the Intel CPU limits. So definitely change your power limits to Intel stock limits if you haven't done that already on your PC. But I'm excited to see these guys in action, and looks like we don't have to wait long, only a month to go till July. Stick around for that, hit subscribe on the channel because we're going to be covering these sooner or later. Now, there's some AI PC and what Ryzen does with AI and so on. I'm kind of like, honestly, AI, yeah, cool, but I haven't seen yet like how this affects me. I'd like to know like what's it like for you and how much you're using AI. But it seems like this is not exactly kind of doable, or I can't really measure how good the AI is in my PC or in my workflow. So it kind of feels like, yeah, cool that you're doing it, but I don't know how useful this is. Let me know if you feel the same. But the Ryzen AI is going to be now on the laptops as well, and they're going to change the laptop naming scheme completely. As you can see, there's AMD Ryzen AI 9HX370, which is a 12 core. That's going to be interesting. So laptops, 12 cores now from AMD, that is different. We used to have only up to 8 cores. That's interesting. And up to 5.1 gigahertz boost, up to 2x power efficiency. So if we're getting 2 times performance at the same power efficiency, that's going to be very, very interesting. Now, another interesting thing that you notice in the keynotes is that, not sure if you knew, the Snapdragon X is one of those ARM processors that are going to come out for Windows, and hopefully we're going to get some very nice performance out of those as well. But AMD is including the Snapdragon X in their benchmarks because obviously looks like they feel like this is the competition, and they want to show their how much and how good their NPU, the neural processing unit, the AI one is. Apple M4 38, and then the Ryzen is 50, and then Intel's Lunar Lake kind of a guessed benchmark somewhere between there, but they put it the same for Snapdragon, so they're guessing some of these benchmarks there. But the interesting bit is the Qualcomm Snapdragon X Elite, because AMD obviously feels that it is a competition for them, that they need to show how much better they are. So here, if you're looking at the difference between 3rd gen AMD Ryzen AI PCs, or the chips which are mobile chips, the AI 9HX370, which has the 12 cores. But interestingly, if we're comparing it to Intel Core Ultra 9 185H, which is the best that Intel has there, for video editing in Premiere Pro, look at that. AMD is 40% better. I mean, I don't trust these benchmarks until I've actually tested it, but that looks insane. In terms of 3D rendering, 73% faster. That is absolutely ridiculous. And multitasking about 47-50% faster, that's ridiculous for Intel Core Ultra 9. Now, if you're looking at the Apple M3, so these are the MacBook Airs, for example, the video editing in Premiere Pro is 11% faster on the Ryzen one. Now, if that is true, that is very impressive. Multitasking is 70% faster, and 3D rendering in Blender is basically 2x performance. I'd like to see that. Now, I know Apple is super efficient. I'd like to see how much power the Ryzen AI HX370 is going to pull, because the Apple M3 is going to pull like, what, 20 watts max, something like that. In power efficiency, like performance per watt, Apple's still probably going to be better than the Ryzen one here, but ultimate performance is going to be, that is very interesting benchmarks here. And then the Snapdragon X Elite. So no one really, I don't think, has released any performance, like third-party performance on the Snapdragon X Elite yet, but it looks to be 5 to 60% faster. Interesting for Premiere Pro, for example, it's not here. They have to use the Geekbench responsiveness, productivity, ProCyan, and then Cinebench scores there, and graphics scores here, not like Blender, because Blender is probably not supported yet on the ARM processors there, and Premiere Pro is the same, so we'll have to see what that's going to be like. But regardless, very interesting slide. Then there's some epic and server stuff, and as you can see, AMD is powering the world's data centers. That's very interesting. I mean, for data centers, AMD is going to be so much better. I mean, this is one interesting slide, for example, how much virtual machines AMD can have compared to Intel. So Intel's size looks like that. You have to stack 5 of them on top of each other. You have 380 virtual machines, and you have 4,000, so it's 4.4 kilowatts power usage, whereas AMD can do 480 virtual machines, which is more at third of the power consumption, 1.5 kilowatts, which is absolutely insane. So you have 2 epic 96 cores here, whereas you have Xeons with 28 cores in there. As you can see, it's like absolutely ridiculous. So you can save in space and power consumption, which is quite interesting. So thinking about the power saving here in the UK, so extra 3 kilowatts is going to cost you between 1 to 1.5 pounds per hour roughly. So per day, that's going to be, let's say conservative, £1 times 24. So that's going to be 24 pounds per day. That's going to be a saving of £8,760 per unit a year. Now, if you've got 100 of these in your data center, then that's going to be £876,000 saving a year in electricity costs if you go with the AMD Epic ones compared to the Intel ones. That's quite ridiculous performance increase per watt. So some more Epic stuff and data center, blah, 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 blah. And performance of AI, and then how much CPU and AI. So AMD is coming out with their Instinct MI325X accelerator for AI stuff, for data centers. So no one, you and me, are not gonna buy this. The end notes here for you to check out as well if you wanna dig deeper a little bit in the previous slides. But the CPU isn't all that they launched. There's also GPUs, which is quite interesting. So the AMD Radeon Pro, they are releasing this as well. So now the AMD Radeon Pro W7900 has a dual slot card, which is quite interesting. Now, take a look at this. Now you can have a multi-GPU support in your PC. I think that was supported previously as well, but I don't think it was dual slot there for the 7900, because now you can have lots of them in your system. You have 48 gigabytes of VRAM, and the total board power is only 300 watts. For NVIDIA Ada 6000, that's going to be a lot more. And here's one interesting stat actually, versus NVIDIA RTX 6000 Ada comparison. But bear in mind, this is better performance per dollar. Okay, so this is not how much better one is over the other. They've taken the scores of both of them and then calculated the difference per dollar. Because the W700 Pro Radeon card costs only $3,500 compared to the $6,800 on NVIDIA. That's almost twice as expensive, which means that if they perform the same, then suddenly AMD looks to be 2x basically the performance for the same price point, which is interesting performance per dollar. But if you look at just the performance on both of these cards, it doesn't look, you know, as good for AMD. So that's why it's performance per dollar here. As you can see, 2x compared to the Ada 6000 in Puget Bench DaVinci Resolve standard overall score. So basically it performs the same as Ada 6000 on the standard one. Probably extended is going to be lower. and certain ones in there, because I know that the AMD cards perform quite well on Fusion, but you know, once you start to go extended things, I think the Ada would perform better and these scores would be a little bit lower down. But the standard one is a weird one to actually show, because people who buy these cards for DaVinci Resolve won't be using 4K footage to edit on DaVinci Resolve. It's going to be a lot higher resolution of footage to use in there. PCMark 10 digital content creation is going to be 2.x. So basically, it looks like it's going to be about the same performance as 6000 in certain applications here, with exactly the same, but about half the price point, which is very interesting. And also some AI workloads for your PCs. You can put multiple GPUs there, including 7900 XTX into your PC, and they get some more AI basically stuff going on in there. And they're showing how you can get more W7900 GPUs running at the same time, multi-serving environments with a lot of VRAM. That's going to be good for AI and so on. This is an interesting PC that they put on the side here. Look, there's radiators on the side here. What is going on? And who rendered this case? That is a weird looking case. No USB-C front panel output. And Threadripper CPU socket with RAM only on the right side. Well, that is weird as well. Usually your Threadripper is going to be like RAM like that above and below, but I don't know. Looks like the card is going to be with two 8-pin PCIe power connectors, so no 16-pin or anything like that going on there. Is nice. Availability 19th of June again, so looks pretty interesting and good to me. So also about the new motherboards, now there is X870 and X870E and B equivalent motherboards out there. USB 4 standard for all, which is very nice. PCIe Gen 5 graphics and NVMe on all, which is kind of already for most of the X670 motherboards, it was already out there, but now the 8 one is there. But now with the X870 motherboards, there's that, they're standard as well. I think that was previous as well, so that's not like amazing really for me. Higher AMD export memory clock support on the motherboards. Now I wonder if the actual CPU memory spec goes higher as well, because on the Ryzen 7000 it's 5200 megatransfers per second. I hope that then now the memory controller is going to be better and it's going to be higher, but we'll have to see that. But also AMD announced some CPUs for the AM4 sockets. So now the 5900 XT and 5800 XT. Previously the XT meant extra 200 megahertz boost on like your CPUs or something like that. Nothing major really, extra 5-10% performance, something very marginal. Now the Ryzen 9 5900 XT, which usually is a 12 core model, now gets 16 cores, so an up to 4.8 gigahertz boost. So the cache and the TDP are exactly the same, but now the actual core clocks, but now the core gets a little bit more for the 5900 XT. Is this going to be majorly different? We'll have to see that, how good this is, but AMD is saying that high-end performance for gamers and creators, yet they'll show absolutely zero benchmarks for creators compared to the 13700K. But if you can just get the 13700K performance on your previous platform with the 5900 XT, that is mighty impressive. Definitely something that Intel's not doing. Now here they show only game performance, and the previous was also only game, so that's interesting. So if we're looking at which laptops are going to come out, then look at that. Premium creator, you can see that the ProArt P16 and X13 are going to come out with AMD CPUs as well. I'm very excited to check that out to see how good this is going to be. The ZenBook S16 as well. So that is a very light, slim motherboard. A laptop. I'd love to check that one out as well. So Asus they're coming out some very interesting laptops with Asus. With AMD, the Prestige would be interesting to check out. I don't think this is going to be as good there. This would be interesting. The Summit A16 with the AI and productivity and with a pen, that will be interesting there as well. But I think it's exciting. A little more fire for Intel, that's all we need. So in conclusion, is Intel in trouble? I think kinda. In terms of server stuff and AMD EPYC, Intel's got like very little chance in there. I think they're gonna drop the ball a little bit more and more. So they're gonna have to change something in there. Secondly, in terms of creators, if these benchmark results there are anything to go by, what we're going to have is more performance at lower power draw than Intel, which is fantastic. The only problem is for video editors who rely on the QuickSync, it might be a little bit of an issue there because we still don't have that on AMD. Now, I really want the AMD to actually develop something with their iGPU, or equivalent to QuickSync, like AMD Sync or Video Sync or something like that, so we can utilize the iGPU and get hardware accelerated playback for certain codecs in Adobe products that we only have on Intel. Even NVIDIA doesn't support H.265, 422, 10-bit, for example, hardware acceleration playback, so the Intel iGPU is still a little bit of an edge in there. But regardless, Intel, I think, is going to be in power, because if these are priced accordingly, lower than Intel, and perform better at the lower price point and consume less power, oh my word, Intel is in trouble. Now, if you want to see these CPUs in action, hit subscribe. Hopefully that content is coming out soon. And if you want to reach out, I'll always get back to my Minnect messages, and there's some best bang for buck creator PCs build guides in the description below that you can check out and build them if you want. Everything is explained there, completely free for you to check out. Thanks guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.